Scythian warfare. Scythian warfare used state-of-the-art recurve bows and hit-and-run tactics against set infantry formations. Working from nimble horses, Scythian warriors could unleash a cloud of lethal arrows. Known, too, for their innovative use of scale armor, they also fought hand-to-hand with shield and sword. Dominating the steppe of Central Asia between the 7th and 3rd centuries BCE, the nomadic Scythians were indeed formidable. For personal protection, besides using single-piece greaves to protect the shins, the Scythians were specialists in scale armor. Onto soft leather corselets, they attached iron plates in overlapping fish scale fashion using animal tendons. The size of the plates could vary depending on the parts of the body covered. Scales around the arms and shoulders were smaller to facilitate free motion. Scale was also used to fashion helmets and to overlay wooden shields. Over time, Scythian warfare also utilized full metal helmets of the Kuban and Corinthian types. As part of their offensive array, battle axes, maces, lances, and spears are found among their grave goods. Some of the lances discovered are around 3 meters, 10 feet, in length, and the spears are 1.8 meters, 6 feet. While the mace may have been more a status symbol, the use of shields and swords was basic to any infantry maneuver. Besides the plate-covered shields of their heavy cavalry, ordinary soldiers used lighter shields of woven osiers. Many of their earlier double-bladed swords were around 60 centimeters, 2 feet, and tapered at the tip, while later 5th century swords tapered from hilt to tip in an elongated triangle fashion. However, the Scythian warriors' most effective weapon was the bow. Made of laminated wood, horn, sinew, and glues, it represented the apex of bow technology copied by subsequent nations like the Parthians, Mongols, and Turks. These bows were fashioned in a recurve profile to maximize the acceleration and long-range accuracy of the arrow. Being shorter, they were ideal for shooting arrows from horseback. With a common pattern of a wood core with limbs formed to curve away from the shooter, once strung, the limb strength and springiness were accentuated with pre-soaked horn laminate glued to the inside of the limbs and laminate of pounded sinew glued to the outside. A laborious process, taking up to 2 years to assemble, cure, and dry, the Scythian composite recurve was a valued prize, perhaps even traded to select allies like their Greek partners. As to their performance, there is an account inscribed on a Greek grave monument in Olbia, on the Black Sea, of an Albion named Anaxagoras winning a shooting contest by launching an arrow 521 meters, 1,710 feet. As the Albians were Greek traders living in Scythian territory, it is assumed Anaxagoras' bow was acquired from the Scythians. Much later, using a composite recurve as the direct technological descendant of the Scythian bow, the Turkish Sultan Selim III, 1761–1808 CE, participating in his nation's favorite pastime of flight shooting, shot an arrow 889 meters, 2,916 feet. While Anaxagoras and Selim's bows and arrows would have been modified for a particular performance, the Scythian bow as a standard archetype endured for centuries. As its pattern of manufacture and appearance remained relatively the same for hundreds of years, its ubiquitous adoption by many nations is a testament to its function and performance, especially for horse archers. To carry their bows and up to 75 arrows at the ready, the Scythians produced an interesting container called the garaitos. From this wide leather case, the Scythian warrior could retrieve and release up to 12 arrows a minute. With this rapid-fire technique, given the hundreds of mounted archers who took part in most engagements, one can only imagine the hail of deadly arrows which fell among their enemies. Moreover, if their arrows did not hit a vital part of the body, the poison the Scythians dipped them in would finish the job. Scythicon was reputed to consist of a mixture of snake venom, decomposed snake flesh, and human serum. Arrow points dipped in this lethal concoction could, as Renata Rall states, cause the slightest wound to be fatal, 65. Finally, adding to its terror effect, the Scythians fashioned some of their arrows with barbed tips, making them excruciatingly difficult to remove. While the Scythians organized themselves into separate tribes sharing a common culture, their military communal organization would have been an unsung part of their success. In Crimea, a golden beaker manufactured in the 4th century BCE from the Koloba kurgan shows bivouacked soldiers. While two, with spears and bows at the ready, appear to contemplate their fate in upcoming action, one demonstrates how to string a bow, another removes his comrade's tooth, while yet another bandages a fellow's hurt leg. Another artifact in gold relief from the same kurgan demonstrates a common ritual where two warriors drink together from a horn. Such depictions reveal ways of life intended to instill a shared purpose and camaraderie among soldiers, where individuals fighting for friends against foe create a united, more resilient front. Nevertheless, while Scythian loyalty between soldiers was indeed robust, group loyalty was to their tribe and chief. Additionally, the eminent role women played in their people's military and political life was helpful to their martial success. Unprecedented until modern times, it appears some groups gained social status equal to their men. While the telling of the Amazons finds its way into modern lore, the reality of their history has long been debated. Herodotus' account tells the story of a foreign race of warrior women coming to the shores of Scythia. As a group, they maintained their independence, but eventually intermingled with a band of young Scythian men sent to them by Scythian elders. Though they spoke different languages, the two groups journeyed east to make their own tribe. Herodotus claims the Sarmatians resulted from this union and spoke a hybrid Scythian tongue. Furthermore, these warrior women maintained their independence by following their ancient ways, often hunting on their own and warring alongside their men. They also forbade their daughters from marrying until they had killed a man in combat. Appian validates the sovereign/warrior status of Scythian women. When describing Pompey's 106–48 BCE triumph for defeating Mithridates VI, 120–63 BCE, he includes among the procession of captured kings and generals, female rulers of Scythia, 17.116–117. The fact Appian mentions female rulers, plural and contemporary, indicates a broad, shared, common, and cooperative status of rulership. Additionally, Herodotus' reference of Tomyris, the Scythian warrior queen, defeating Cyrus the Great, c. 600–530 BCE, in battle centuries earlier, again suggests a tradition of female sovereignty. 1.205–214, thus the Scythians as a whole did not hesitate to follow women warriors and rulers. While Herodotus speaks of a 28-year period of forays outside their known environs where they defeated the Medes and were bought off by the Egyptians, their adventure was short-lived. As they pillaged and pilfered wealth, the Medes finally got them drunk and killed many of them, 103–106. Otherwise, they were adept for a long time at protecting the homeland they knew. Their most important strategy was knowing and sticking to a territory conducive to their military style from horseback while avoiding direct engagement with set infantry formations. The geography of the open plain steppe, desert steppe, and forest steppe expanses over which they ranged was more favorable for herding animals and travel by horse than a settled way of life involving agricultural production. Hence, their fewer urban centers and nomadic lifestyle. Scythia's most spectacular victories were against the Persian Empire as they twice thwarted the invasion attempts of the Achaemenid Empire. When Darius I, 522–486 BCE, invaded Scythia, his frustration with the Scythians sticking to their strategy of non-engagement is apparent when, as Herodotus says, he taunted Idanthyrsus to stand and fight or come to terms with your master, 97–142. Idanthyrsus answered, saying that was not Scythia's way of war, they would fight on their own terms. As the Persians entered Scythian territory in 513 BCE by bridging the Danube, the Scythians denied them sustenance by burning their own fields and ruining wells. Staying a day's march ahead, as they led the Persians east above the Black Sea, the Scythians attacked Darius' foraging parties protected by their cavalry. The Scythians always won the cavalry-to-cavalry engagements, but when the Persian cavalry retreated behind infantry lines, the Scythians rode off. As these tactics went on day and night, the Scythians led the Persians deeper into allied territory, then into desolate terrain. Finally, after the Scythians circled back west, the Persians, frustrated and worn out, chose to retreat. It was at this moment the Scythians decided on a three-pronged cavalry attack. Assuming they would quickly find the Persians foraging in areas not burned, the Persians instead kept to their original track. As the Scythians missed them, the Persians made good their escape back over the Danube. Thus, with a strategy of attrition, leading the enemy deep into friendly territory, cutting vital sources, then with hit-and-run tactics and a plan of finishing their opponent off with their most formidable asset, the bow and arrows shot from horseback, the Scythians thwarted Darius' incursion. Ultimately, then, the key to their tactics and strategy were their horses. Considering they were a horse culture, specific sophisticated systems of breeding, care, training, and corralling would have been developed and employed. Once their horses were combat-ready, as they stuck to their strategy of open plains combat, avoiding nighttime raids would have been crucial. One of the most important means of survival, often making the difference in winning or losing a battle, is an adequate supply of food and water. Just as important is the ability to survive when sustenance is scarce. Both Cassius Dio and Plutarch speak of the ruinous effect extreme thirst had on the Roman army at the Battle of Carrhae, 53 BCE, as they fought the Parthians in a midday summer heat. When it came to surviving without water, the Parthians, like the Scythians, had other solutions. The Scythians, too, were reputed to fight without food and water. Before his battle with Philip II of Macedon, 359–336 BCE, Aetius, 429–339 BCE, boasted, "You reign over the Macedonians, men that have learned to fight, but I over the Scythians, who can fight with hunger and thirst." Interestingly, according to Pliny, two plants first discovered by the Scythians, Scythus and Hippase, abate hunger and thirst. If a person keeps Scythus in his mouth, he will never experience hunger or thirst. Hippase, also important for the Scythians, was reputed to have a similar effect on horses. Pliny reiterates the legend that, by the aid of these two plants, the Scythians could endure hunger and thirst for 12 days. Furthermore, another survival technique long used by ancient people is the use of fat. Readily available to the Scythians from the animals they herded, a common practice for horse health is its use in a horse's diet. Descended from the extinct Turkoman horse of Seljuk fame from the Kazakh steppe, the diet of the equally spirited Akaitik is known to include, besides dates and barley, mutton fat. Additionally, the personal consumption of pemmican, fat mixed with dried meat, to forestall starvation and endure cold conditions was widely used by the North American Indians of similar latitude. Besides its long shelf life and popular inclusion in meal preparation, the rendering of fat in one of their cauldrons for select consumption and advantage in times of war was a natural option for the Scythians. Another means of survival, especially in ancient warfare, would have been the healing of blows and cuts to the body. While effective cleansing, dressing, even suturing were known by the ancients, as Greek colonists lived among them, and the people of China and India, long adept at medicinal cures, were their neighbors, the absolute need of the Scythians to heal the wounds of their military personnel means they no doubt would have borrowed, improved, or invented effective cures. Intriguingly, as the Scythians were notably skilled in the lethality of their poisoned arrows, it was their agori, experts in toxicology, who Mithridates made a regular part of his inner circle. Likewise, Mithridates was himself an innovator in theriac recipes.